Alright, so doing a little bit more maintenance today on the 1.9 Polo, my daily driver. Over the last couple of weeks, I've sort of just been chipping away at doing maintenance things, and I haven't been filming because it's been too hard just setting the camera up. I decided, why don't I just use my phone camera and shoot it all on that? So I think I might have even mentioned it in the video where I introduced this car. I have just done a coolant flush, new coolant bottle, and a new thermostat on this car. And just last weekend, I did a fuel filter, air filter, cabin filter, driver's side engine mount, and a gearbox mount on it as well. About a month earlier than that, I also put in a poly street performing poly bush for the dog bone mount at the bottom. So lately in the mornings on the first few shifts of the day, every time it goes into third, I'm greeted with a nice little crunch sound. Now, I normally don't believe in sort of changing fluids is going to fix everything and be the be-all end-all result. However, a lot of people have suggested that changing the gearbox fluid may help rectify this third gear crunch when cold. So, for the sake of what gearbox fluid is worth, and just to do it as I'm trying to keep this vehicle alive for as long as possible, I'm going to be changing the gearbox fluid in an attempt today to hopefully fix a third gear crunch, as well as a little bit of a whine in fourth gear that I've noticed the vehicle's just started to develop. Now, this car has been in my friend group for the last sort of 3 years or so I can tell you now that the gearbox fluid hasn't been changed for at least around 60,000 kilometers. Although this fluid is, I believe, lifelong, it is recommended to replace it. Like anything that has lifelong fluid, just replace it because it's going to help things keep alive for a lot longer. So coming up on 300,000 kilometers, I think it's a really good idea that we do some services and maintenance on this car, so that gearbox fluid is going to come out. And now for the fluid, I'm going to be using some Penrite 75W90 GL4. For Volkswagen 5-speed gearboxes, make sure you are using GL4 fluid, as GL5 will eat away at the brass inside the shifter forks. So make sure it's a GL4 fluid. Something along these lines is perfect. You're also going to need a gearbox fluid pump, something like this, to pump the fluid back into the gearbox. Otherwise, you're going to have a very tough time as the filler is quite close to the radiator. So let's get our jack under the car, jack it up, put it on jack stands, and start draining this fluid. I want to let this drain for at least a few hours to get as much of that old, dirty, contaminated fluid out as possible. So with the vehicle now on jack stands, get yourself an oil container to put the dirty fluid in. Preferably one cleaner than mine, as it's going to be able to allow you to assess the fluid condition much nicer. And to drain the fluid on one of these, you're going to need something like this, a 17mm hex. Now underneath the vehicle, locate the filler as well as the drain. Now you want to undo the filler first to make sure this comes out. No point draining the fluid if you can't put more fluid back in it. With the filler now removed, undo the drain. Now this car has been up to temperature for a little bit. I just took it to the shop, so this fluid is going to be a little bit waterier, just because it's obviously warmer. So just loosen this off. This stuff is going to smell terrible, and once you've got it loose enough, dump it into the thing. That is very, very watery. General condition though, from what I'm seeing, isn't as bad as what I was expecting. This might have been in fact changed relatively recently. Alrighty, so the fluid is basically finished draining. Now it's been about half an hour I've let this sit here. So what you want to do, pop obviously that lower drain plug back in. Then we're going to make our way back up to the filler plug and top this up until oil starts coming out of the filler plug. Alright, so I now have a litre of that fluid in the container here, which I'm going to pump into the gearbox just by squeezing down, and this is going to start filling it up. Now I'm going to assume I'm going to be able to get this whole litre in there, and then probably about another 400-500 millimeters. That's just going to top up the actual gearbox itself, and then once the gearbox itself starts flowing out to begin with, advised by the service manual is then to put the filler plug back in, engage the vehicle in gear. For me, I'm just going to choose first gear, and then let the vehicle run for 2 minutes in gear. This way you get all the oil circulated around the gearbox. Then stop the vehicle obviously, remove this plug again, and then top up the fluid. Once that's done, that way you ensure you have oil all around the gearbox and topped up to the maximum level. So I'm just going to do the tedious process of pumping all this fluid in now. So our pump is basically finished up now. We have just over a litre in here. So I'm going to fill this bottle back up, and I'm also going to document how much I can put in there in total. I don't think I drained the gearbox fully. Last time I actually let this gearbox sit overnight and drain on my other Polo. This one I definitely haven't done that or let it sit that long. So I don't imagine I'm probably going to get the full roughly 2 litres these things take. But anyway, we'll document that, and we'll see how much extra fluid running the gearbox as per the manual actually adds to the vehicle. All right, so I can start to see now that we have fluid draining out the top. So far, the gearbox has taken approximately 1.7 litres. If you can see on the front here, we've got 300 ml left in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this drain tube out. Probably going to encourage a little bit more flow. Just going to let that sit over top there. I'm going to get this fill plug here, get it up there into the blocks. Just start that thread, do that up nice and tight. And obviously I'll get my ratchet onto it as well and just snug it up a little bit. This isn't going to have to be like super tight because this is going to get removed again in a couple of minutes. So we'll just snug this down. That should be probably tight enough right there. Now it's time to start the vehicle, put it in first gear and let it run for 2 minutes. Now, obviously, because the wheels are going to be spinning, I just suggest have a quick look under your vehicle and make sure there's nothing contacting the tires, and also double check the tires are off the ground. That they both are. So let's start it up. Rightio, so cranking and engage first, let the clutch out, you'll see the wheel speed go up. Now I will let you know this may throw, oh that's the handbrake, this may throw an ABS light very shortly. Pretty standard for running a car like this where the front wheels are spinning and the back wheels aren't spinning. It's going to trick the computer into thinking something's not quite right. So just an advisory, expect you will probably get an ABS light. But let's let this run for 2 minutes now, shut the vehicle off and then top it up accordingly. Okay, the vehicle's now been running a little over 2 minutes. Gonna clutch in, see the wheel speed slowing down, turn the vehicle off. Now I'm just gonna let things settle for a couple of minutes before I pull out that plug, just so everything has a time to settle down, very similarly to what you would do when you check engine oil on the dipstick. Probably not a bad idea whilst you wait to do exactly that. Let's have a look, just double check, make sure our oil is good. Obviously it's gonna be very dark being a diesel. And we're actually relatively low on oil, so maybe put a little bit of oil in this as well while we're doing it. Also, if I haven't mentioned already, whilst you are doing this, ensure the back is also jacked up. I've done this a bit dodgily, but it's not too concerning because you're not under the back of it. But make sure the vehicle is sitting level whilst you are topping up the fluids. All right, perfect. Let's pop this filler back in and we'll see how much more fluid we can pump into the box. So we really only got about 100 millimeters more back, milliliters even, more back into it until it started overflowing. But that's about right. We've done about probably 1.8 liters of fluid into the gearbox, of which we probably didn't drain the full thing out. So I'm going to go ahead and put the fill plug back in. Just got to be careful here, line this up nicely. Obviously you're not going to cross thread it by hand, but of course you want to make sure that should go in a good 10 turns comfortably by hand like it is now before you need to get your ratchet. So just like that, wipe my hands down quickly and just do this up. Again, you don't have to go crazy tight with this, just nice and snug. And then just give the remaining area a bit of a hit with just some brake and parts cleaner or a cleaner. And let that all drain in there, and then just give it with a cheeky little rag. Give it all a bit of a wipe down to get rid of any of that excess gear oil left over. Perfect. Now that's a successful oil change on an O2R gearbox. Let's get this thing back on the ground, take it for a spin, and see if what we've done is worth our time. And this here is the oil that came out of the gearbox. Don't pay attention to the darkness. A lot of that's going to be from that brake cleaner and probably some leftover engine oil. But pay attention to the metallicness in this oil, I think this gearbox is going to love its life now. Now, one final thing to do, I like to do, is pour away the excess oil into a container and just pay close attention to the oil as it is draining, specifically the last of it, just to see how metallic it is. Also, make sure you are disposing of your oil correctly. Most service centers or tips will take waste oil, so make sure you dispose of it responsibly because it is helping to save the environment. Now, one thing I do find kind of disconcerting is that the viscosity of this oil does appear to be that of sort of engine oil, so I am glad I am changing this fluid. Alright, and there we have it. The car's back on the ground with fresh gearbox fluid in it. Also check the oil level as well and top that up accordingly. Let's go take it for a drive and see if that's made any improvement to the way this gearbox shifts. Alright, so we're just going to take off with it now and see how it's going. So far so good. Nice change in a second then. Everything feels really well. Change it into third gear. Obviously you can see here on our coolant temp as well, everything's cold as well. So it's so far seems like a big improvement over what it used to be like. So I'd say that's a job well done. And there we have it. New gearbox fluid is in the Polo, and that's just another bit of maintenance done to this car. Coming up at 300, I'll do another oil change on it, as that's when it will be due. But other than that, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching me change the gearbox fluid on this Polo or learnt how to do it the proper way. With that being said, catch you guys in the next video.